right, so what we're talking about in this episode
Why are you smiling so hard right now?
I smile all the time. So in this episode, we are kind of doing something in light of Women's History Month. And so this episode is just me talking with Duck about just how he has come to cultivate relationships with women. And yeah, so I really just want to talk through just your relationships with other women, how you experience maybe mutual discipleship with other women, how you seek to cultivate relationships with other women, just because I think it's helpful for people to think through. And so I'll be asking you different questions. He does not know what I'm going to ask him, but I'll ask you just different questions about how you navigate interacting with married women, with single women. And if you want, like, as we're talking, you could pose questions to me, if something comes up. But yeah, so my first question is, do you have friendships and relationships with Christian women outside of me?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you have those?
Well,
is there a reason, or you just happen to?
Multiple reasons. Some of them I knew them before I knew you. And so it's I think in like a real practical way, it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to disconnect completely from them, because I met you and we started dating and all this, especially if my relationship with them was not in any type of dating way, like they were genuinely sisters, friends. And then other reason is just being in the faith. Like, when I came into the faith, when I became a believer, some of them had been in the faith longer than me, right, at that point. But they were helpful in me growing in my Christian maturity. And so those are a couple of the reasons. There are many more. I mean, we're still good friends to this day. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons is some of them are actually better friends with you now. Yeah. Than they are with me. So I don't know how I feel about that, but
I mean, that's to be expected.
I don't know.
Because I am arguably more fun than you. And arguably, I know I'm funnier than you.
I don't think either one of those are arguments. No, I'm saying, like, I agree.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you wouldn't. I mean, somebody else might make the argument.
Yeah, I think, too, your personality, you're way more vibrant and lively. And
so it's almost expected.
That's not
It's almost expected that if Duck meets somebody, they're probably going to like me better. And it's not like a knock to who he is, because he's super cool. But it's just something, I'm just more vibrant. And so I tend to be, and I'm more of a social butterfly too. Yeah. So I actually enjoy people and like being among like large groups of people. Yeah, more so.
For sure. You the butterfly, I'm the caterpillar in the cocoon. Like, I'm like,
right,
just let me fall back in the cut. I don't want any attention. I don't want
nothing. You try to live in the cocoon. Well, you actually do live in the cocoon. Meanwhile, I don't ever go in the cocoon. I'm just out here.
Man, you flying everywhere. Like, man.
So what have been some of the benefits of having female Christian friends?
Yeah. I would say there have been contributions and types of sharpening and understanding about women in general, but also women in the faith, that I'm not sure I would have been formed in a particular way had I not had those relationships. And I would even say it's more expansive than just my female friends who I have to this day. But, when I started going to church, after, becoming a believer, I went to a church that had mothers, right? Mm-hmm. So this idea of these older, seasoned, wise, mature women, which that was the hope for a lot of them, but them being there and them being able to instruct or just see how they live their lives as Christians, but how they live their lives as Christian women, how they conducted themselves, how they knew the word, how they can rattle off scripture that way, how you can see it applied. Right. And so that was a particular type of formation in general, not just because they were a woman, but they were women who I saw that example of faith in. But also, I would see how they would interact with older men and younger men and younger women. And so just seeing that type of formation, right? Almost the idea of like some stuff is caught, not taught. So just seeing how they live their lives. And so those are older women, but also younger women who we were trying to figure out this Christian faith together in a real way. And so hearing some of the questions they have, some of the questions that they think about, ways that they may see how something should be played out, or a particular question that they may have concerning the faith that I may not have because I'm a guy and I just may not have ever considered these particular ideas. And those have been really formative to just kind of think through, or at least at time I've thought of them, and now they're so ingrained in the way that I move and operate to some of it is somewhat of a blur. Like I don't even remember some of it, but it's one of those things that's shaped me so much to it comes out in who I am now. I don't know if that's...
Were you at all like worried that not worried because you typically don't worry, but did you have to figure out how to keep those female relationships once you got married? Like, was that something you had to think through, what it looked like for you to have female friends once you became married?
I would say I did think through it, but honestly, by that point, I think more of my thoughts stemmed from external ideas of how men and women should be in relationships and friendships. So there weren't these things that I had inherently like, man, I don't know, should I still be, like, could this be this or this or this? But it was more so like, outside kind of in, like, how do most people, like, treat their friendships with, once they get married, but also what will people think about this particular situation, or what would people think about me being friends with that person? So one thing I tried to do was to move through that idea and kind of dismissing, of course using wisdom, but dismissing some of the external ideas or questions, but also trying to include you in that process, which I think that's one of the reasons now you have much better I still don't know how I feel about this, but you're much closer friends with them than I am now. And so I think that's kind of the most that I've had to work through and think through. But once I kind of figured that out, and that was a pretty quick process, right? And so that's pretty much it. Yeah,
I think for me, like, because I have always been a social butterfly, and I've always navigated male friendships and female. And so I'm an equal opportunity offender. Like, I want to be, like, kind of in the midst of both. And I remember I personally didn't want to have to change the fact that I was going to be having friendships with men and women, or men more specifically. But I also didn't want to have a marriage where you were going to be off limits to all other women except for me, because I don't think that that's fair to single women particularly, and women in general, because the way I thought about our relationship is that in Timothy, he talks about this purity between brothers and sisters. And so I think because I understood you as a brother, and I understood that there was a dynamic between Christian men and women that was platonic brother and sisterhood, I just made up in my mind that I would dare not take your brotherhood away from the women that you came in contact with, because that wouldn't be fair to them. That wouldn't be fair to them to not allow you to, one, use your gifts to help cultivate their gifts, to help give them wisdom and insight, to love them well, to encourage them. It also wouldn't be fair to you to not be able to benefit from having other female friends. Like, they have gifts, they can, like, help you think through things. Like, I don't have everything to offer, and so I think it would have, for me, it just didn't make sense to think that you could be who God intended you to be at every stage of life with just interacting with me. I just didn't see that as being.
Yeah.
That ain't where it is.
What's the point of the church?
Yeah, right? Right. Like, yeah, so I just wanted to... So I did try to make it easier for you to have those relationships, which is why I would try to be intentional, be like, oh, go talk to so-and-so. Or... you know, reach out to blah, 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 or I want you to meet so-and-so. Yeah. And then I would, like, there would be times where I would get up and leave out of the room on purpose to help kind of create a space where this could be okay. And even today, like, when we go and hang out with some of our friends here, if I see you interacting in a conversation with my friend girl, I'll get up and walk away. Just so, like, she can feel like she has the freedom to engage with you without me being there.
Yeah, I think that's really good, and that's one of the things that I've tried to do, and I think you said it really well about the sisterhood, brotherhood, because that seems to be one of the clearest and lasting relationships in Scripture. And so, another woman in the faith is my sister, and so if I really think through what that means and try to process this sister-brother relationship, I think there is benefit to that, and there is mutual help that can be had, and so for that reason, that's kind of the way I approach it. What is also interesting is that in some of our Christian spaces, it's so foreign and it's so weird for a person who's married to maybe have a conversation with a person who's single. And I don't even mean any type of, I just mean a general conversation like we have it now.
What class are you taking?
Basic stuff. Like, have you seen that movie? Like basic stuff. There's almost this fear of like, oh man.
But there is a reason for that, right?
There is a reason for that.
Normally when we talk about men and women in the same sentence, it's either about men having authority over them and women recognizing that authority and being submissive. Some people would even encourage single women to be submissive to every single man they come in contact with. And then also sex. Being told to protect themselves from women.
Facts.
As if we're all just walking harlots waiting to, enslave men to our ability to be seductive. And so it makes sense that whenever you are talking to a man by yourself as a female, you are thinking, okay, let me make sure I'm not doing this because I don't want him to think da-da-da. And some men are not. Some men come right out of the world to become Christian. They haven't even been discipled on how to see women differently once they become Christian. They don't even know what affection looks like that's platonic. And so if you do something that's super nice for them, they get nervous. And they start thinking, And so it makes sense that those conversations will be awkward because we've kind of made them awkward.
I've had conversations with some of our female friends who are single, and some of the conversations we have been really fruitful. And then I know you've had conversations with some of our male friends who are single, but that can be so helpful beyond the dating sense, but in a dating sense, because if I think about some of my female friends, like they may have questions about like a guy, and if the vast majority of the men that are in their church or they've been around who are married has that approach, how will they really try to process and think through with wisdom how they should see a particular situation? And it goes beyond dating. It could be job. Maybe I had a job that a person is now has. Like, how can I help them navigate? And then how can they help me, right? And so I think even on a practical living day to day, it can just be really helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just kind of, I definitely think you have to be intentional to remove those perceptions, because those are real life perceptions that people have about the opposite sex. And so you have to be intentional to remove that, to think rightly about people. And that's not to say that you go into it unwise, because there have been at least 2 times where I've been like, I don't know about her. Like, just kind of, You don't have to not talk to her, but just be a little more careful with her.
I've come to you and be like,
yeah,
yo, I don't know about this person. Yeah.
So just exercise some caution. And so I think there's room for people to determine strategies and to take precautions.
For sure.
That's rooted in who you are and like who you know you are, and then also being able to discern.
Yeah.
Because I would say for you, like you tend to be very level-headed, and there aren't a lot of, you don't seem to sexualize women. Even when we were friends, that didn't seem to be a struggle for you. And so I'm not really cautious about you with other women because I don't know you to have, inclinations to over sexualize women or to be in that way. Right.
The Lord
and
redeems,
so I would say if a man does have those things, then I don't think he should banish women, but he definitely might use different precautions.
Yeah, so in no way are we getting at this idea of don't be wise and don't exercise discernment.
But don't be afraid. Like, I'm not encouraging people to be afraid to have relationships. Because it's not helpful for women, especially single women, if all the men that they interact with are either married or they're single. If they're married, they don't have any access to them unless it's like at church and then it's in passing. Yeah. If it's single, it's super awkward.
Yeah.
So half of the time they probably don't even want to have relationships with them. And so that leaves them really like grasping for any type of fellowship and community they can have. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, it's probably going to be with other single women, because the married women sometimes act like they're so busy that they don't have time for single women. Mm-hmm. And then the married men are afraid of them, and the single men don't know what to do with them. So it can just be super difficult for women, but also single women in particular, to build friendships with the opposite sex. And so I encourage men to really carve out spaces for having those relationships, but also for married women to really carve out spaces to allow their husbands to be in relationship with other women wisely, and definitely not fearfully.
Yeah, that's good. Let me add something else, just by way of context for me real quick. When I came to faith, I was on a college campus, a little over 20,000 people, and the Christian population, I think, was below 1,000. And so when you look at from a numbers perspective, actually it probably was way less than that. But all that to say, when I came into the faith, I'm trying to figure out, how do I now go from this person who was doing whatever every single day, every single week, to living what I see to be in the scriptures. And so there was there was not this idea of, okay, she's a woman, I need to stay away from her. It's like, oh, you've been a Christian for 3 years? I've been a Christian for 3 days. Help a brother out.
Right.
So there's this idea like, how do I navigate this Christian life? And I think that's just part of the grace of the Lord to bring me into the faith. And there were men and women around me, and I benefited and I learned a great deal. And one of the most formative things after I began growing, the way I used to share the gospel, one of my really good female friends pulled me to the side and said, basically, boy, you need to stop doing that because you are so forceful. And I'm like, me? I'm forceful? She was like, yeah, you are so...
I believe that, and I wasn't even there.
All right, this ain't... anyway, but it was just this idea of your passion and desire comes across so strong, it actually pushes people away. I had been sharing the gospel with guys, and none of them said that to me. Mm-hmm. Like, we have been out talking to people, and none of them said anything remotely close, but it was this sister who pulled me aside and said, hey, you might want to consider this. And when I thought about it, I'm like, yo, like, she's right, you're right, thank you. And that just kind of reoriented the way that I even approach sharing the gospel.
That's actually one of the reasons why I almost encourage kind of a cross-gender discipleship. Not in necessarily a formal sense, but I do think that there are benefits to having relationships with women because they have different sensitivities. They have, it's almost like they ask different questions. They tend to be a lot more like specific and understanding like complexities of relationships and relationship building. And so there is a lot that men can gain from having women in their life, because sometimes you don't see that maybe you aren't kind enough, or maybe you aren't being gentle, or maybe you aren't being patient, or maybe you're not being disciplined enough. And it's not even to say that women have certain characteristics like, oh, they're so kind and so gentle, so patient. No, some of them are very persistent and have great self-control and great discipline. And sometimes it could be possible that the men could learn from women how to be a good student, how to be faithful in their callings, and so I do think
how to be a good worker.
Right.
Like,
so yeah, I definitely think there is some benefit to having those relationships, specifically men having relationships with women. So, last question: what are some practical things that you do? By practical, I mean you put this into practice in order to cultivate deep relationships with women.
Yeah, there are quite a few things. I'm sure I'm not going to remember them all now. One of them is I try to connect them with you and just kind of explain, like, hey, this is my wife and this is how we think about things. And that builds to this next idea of, particularly in this context we're in now, people are really tough on the Billy Graham rule, like this idea. And so one of the things I say on the front end is like, hey, I understand how dynamics can be. I understand the whole Billy Graham rule and all that stuff. I'm not, with all due respect, I'm not Billy Graham, nor do I come from that context. However, I get it. If you kind of want to have this distance, that's cool. But I'm here as a brother if there are things you want to dialogue about and talk about more, and not have to have this particular shield or idea that will cause either one of us, or particularly you, but either to kind of tiptoe around certain things. So I guess.
Wait, what do you mean particularly me?
Like, I mean her, not you. Oh. I mean the woman, like the lady.
Okay. I was like, me. It's like, what you mean me?
No, not you, like the lady that I'm talking to. So I guess to make that more concise.
I don't tiptoe.
Anyway, no, you don't. But I just say on the front end, like, hey, I understand. So just being upfront, I understand what these dynamics can be like in this situation, or how people can make stuff awkward. This is where I am. This is who I am. This is what I believe. So I put my cards on the table from the jump because I don't have anything to hide, and I don't have any ulterior motive. Like, I'm just trying to say, you are my sister. I'm your brother. I feel like I can learn from you. You may be able to sharpen and learn from me or whatever. And so that's really, if anything, that's the most fundamental thing I do whenever I encounter. And then from there, I introduce them to you, and we kind of develop this. Just kind of this evolving, moving relationship, friendship, yeah. And
I think we do that so that I can assure them that you have freedom. Like, you don't have to. I told this to our friend Vanessa a couple weeks ago. I was like, you don't have to text me and Duck at the same time in a group message. Like, you can just send your text directly to him. Yeah. But I try to be reassuring to say, oh, you cool with Duck? Okay. That's cool. Like, you don't need me to foster that friendship. Yeah. And I would say, like, if I felt like something was weird or something was kind of maybe we want to not do this, I think I would say that. But I haven't had an experience of that.
And here's the other thing that goes with that. I don't think anybody is above any type of like sin or discrepancy or whatever the case. But what I do know is that I pray for wisdom every day, multiple times a day, and I feel the Lord has given me wisdom and a measure of discernment. But also, you have probably the highest discernment of anybody I know. And so I think those combinations together, and I don't say this in any kind of like bragging way, but I do say that this to say I think the Lord has worked these ideas with us and allowed us to use wisdom and discernment. And so if I feel like something is off, like, then, it's nothing foreign. Like, I know how to navigate it. And if you feel like something is off, you definitely know how to navigate it and will say it. And so I think those things work together with the approach that we try to take with knowing what the scriptures say about us being brothers and sisters. So all that to say, nothing that we do is lacking any type of wisdom or discernment. if anything, it has more wisdom and more discernment, just by the grace of the Lord and us trying to grow, us growing individually and together, but also us growing as the body, right, of believers that surround us in this season.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I would add the only thing that I maybe could encourage like wives to do is to really just contemplate the benefits that your husband could have from having relationships with other women, and also giving room for that, like allowing for a space for that. So some of the things that I do practically is I let people know you don't have to text me in order to text him. You don't have to call me in order to call him. You can talk to him directly. When we're in a group setting and I see you engaging, I'll leave just to kind of help create that, that comfort. There have been moments where I have a friend and we're talking on the phone or doing a Zoom. And then they start talking to you, I'll get up and leave. And I might be gone for an hour just to kind of help cultivate to them. It's okay. Like, it's okay for you to have this relationship with him. And then just rely on your discernment and wisdom and not your fear to help you to make choices on what you do.
And here's the thing. I know for some people this whole conversation probably sounds super weird and super foreign.
And super unwise.
And unwise, right. And I get it, even though we've mentioned wisdom multiple times.
Right.
But in a real kind of practical way, like, what do pastors do? Right? Like, pastors are engaging in these types of in conversations with people in a similar way, whether it's in person, on the phone, on Zoom.
But I think that's the difference. Because we're trying to build life with people. We're not trying to have these like static interactions.
Right.
And so because you are creating a space where these people are family, like we are cultivating a life, fellowship, and community.
Yeah.
I think that allows a lot more freedom. It honestly, there isn't a day where I'm just like, I don't know if I want to, because it's more of like a family. Like, here are brothers and sisters. We exist in this community, and so you need him. Have at it.
And I think that's one of the differences of. Some would say we are family and we are brothers and sisters, but then there are some who live that out. And I don't say this in any kind of way like, we this model, but I think that's the difference, because we've both been around people since we've been married and when we were single, where people use that terminology. You sis or brother, you part of the family of God. But when it comes to seeing that familiar relationship work out, you don't see it.
Yeah. Well, that's our conversation. Hopefully you enjoyed it. See you later.